Hey folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. This is Chris coming to you live from Central Pennsylvania once again here on YouTube. Well, it's Friday, lekker lekker Freitag. Excellent, excellent. Good to see. We got some folks already in the chat. Some of the usual suspects. Apparently, Kaiser Sose must be somewhere nearby since we have the usual suspects here. Welcome, folks. It is Friday, September 4th, 2020. Where the hell did 2020 go? I've been robbed. I have been robbed, as has the other 8 or 9 billion Homo sapiens on this planet. Mostly, not by a virus, ladies and gentlemen, but mostly by capricious governance, by hysterical political leaders around the world who've been stealing our freedom. You know, it's dangerous in places like Victoria, Australia, to post things on Facebook in which you express freedom of speech and you say, folks should go out to the demonstration and rally lawfully. You know why? Because if you're pregnant and you're at home and you're on your way for an ultrasound, the police will come and arrest you in your home. Yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. That's the world we're living in today. Well, we have somebody who has a brighter view on the world. He's kind of an optimist, at least he likes to be. Strange name, though, and you've known him on the channel. His name is the Dodgy Idealist. So we're going to bring him on just here now. And by the way, I should let you know that I'm not disclosing his name. He's actually the love child of the famous television announcer for game shows, Wink Martindale. So this is Wink Martindale Jr., okay, in case you didn't know that. So don't tell anybody. My viewership has been down this week, so I think the secret is safe. So this is Wink Martindale Jr., also known as the Dodgy Idealist. Kyle, come on the channel now, Dodgy Idealist.
Thank you for having me. Wow, I don't even know who that is, but I can already see the scandalous headlines. So thank you for having me on, Chris.
That's my pleasure. He's actually did, lots and lots of game shows here in the U.S. He did, and he's actually quite famous. If he's got this great voice, great presence on camera, but I mean, he's just like got the perfect name to be on TV. Wink Martindale. I mean, come on.
Yes, no, that is perfect. That is actually quite perfect. Yeah.
All right. So like other folks whose channel you've been on, I'm going to just call you Dodgy instead of Wink. Okay.
That's 100%. Yeah. I don't think Wink will like it if I appropriate his name.
No,
yes,
actually,
that's the proper term.
Actually, people are going to start running around saying, hey, that's Wink Martindale's kid. I didn't know that. I didn't know he lived this out. You watch.
Yeah, that as well. I'll have to watch here and maybe the paparazzi will show up as well.
Well, we're gonna freewheel it today, folks, and talk about just relax. It's a Friday. I'm still debating about whether to do a Night Owls edition. We'll see if I get around to Night Owls edition tonight because I'm going to be up early in the morning and I've got a lot of work to do for this presentation. But what I will do is after this stream with Dodgy Idealist is I'm going to go out with my mobile and I'm going to try to stream YouTube live just for a short one, just to test to make sure my mobile's working fine for YouTube. It should. But remember, I'll be in the mountains of Wyoming next week, so that's how I'll be streaming. I'm also going to try Streamlabs on my mobile and see if that works as well. So that'll be coming up after this. 2 short ones. I'll call it Walk With Me. We'll be walking around. Anyway. All right, so Dodgy, let's see. We could talk about, cricket South Africa. We could talk about rugby. We could talk about coronavirus. We could talk about socialism. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I think let's talk about cricket South Africa first.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Because that touches on something that D. Martin and I was talking about earlier this week. And it seems like, a lot of people are outraged on this, and rightfully so. I'm also kind of pissed off at this because in our Constitution and within our Bill of Rights, right, there's this little contradiction where they say, no, you can discriminate against persons as long as it's fair discrimination. And they outline that.
Okay, hang on a second. First off, the problem I have with that in your Constitution, which is the most liberal Constitution in the world, it's also the longest freaking Constitution in the world, I think. But
yes,
but it's like 200,000 pages. No, I'm embellishing. It's about 76 pages. But the problem I have with that is that any discrimination is unfair. How can anybody describe discrimination to be fair? Of course, I know where they're going with this. They want to balance the scales of historical inequities. So how does that become fair for children born after 1994 of all races if the scales are tipped the other way? I mean, if you're the mixed race children of Tokyo Sexwale, who's a billionaire, and your children get privileged because their skin is darker, even though their mother's white and she's Afrikaans speaking, what am I missing here?
Precisely. It's for me, it's stupid because it's all based on race, right? And for someone like me that's like grown up in a small town where you made friends with whoever there was, you don't really see race. You start to see the individuals, and you actually get to know that individual. You how can I say it? You judge the person on their character and not on the color of their skin, as Martin Luther would have said. Martin Luther King, so I have to specify that.
No, because Martin Luther was a couple hundred years before that, but gotcha.
Yes. So, and it's really stupid to see, or not stupid, sad to see that, the world has turned so much into a direction that we've come full circle now again. Where certain groups now actually call for such actions to discriminate against a person based on the color of their skin. This excludes, you from a broad range of experts that you could have drawn, good enough experience from. Just excluding people because they're white or black from the economy or from your business, that's not going to, that's not going to help the transformation of that cricket club or for that business, because all that will do is it'll push them towards the competitors. So you might see some of these consultants actually going maybe to India or even to England, Australia, and New Zealand, where they might be wanted, and then we'll face more fierce competition from their side.
Well, that's actually a good point, which nobody even talks about. When sports organizations in South Africa discriminate against South Africans, all it does is make other countries more powerful. And rugby is a good example of this too. I mean, we have Hanko Hammershøi, who is a brilliant rugby player, number 6, who plays for us here in the U.S. He was born in South Africa, but his parents fled and moved to Nebraska, and so he's grown up in Nebraska. And he's brilliant, but he's an Afrikaner, and he's here in the U.S. as an American citizen now, playing for the U.S. national side, and we're happy to have him, but he should be there. And what about DTW van der Merwe in Canada and CJ Stander in Ireland? The list is endless. And all of the rugby players in Japan who are South Africans who are discriminated against and can't work in South Africa. Now, some people say, well, it's because South Africa turns out so many quality rugby players. Well, they do, but a lot of them don't get a chance to play because of this nonsense.
Yeah, because what we also need to remember is they've got a quota system to keep, right? And they have to reach that target on a yearly basis. So they have to show, or not a yearly basis, but maybe a yearly basis. Yeah, let's say on a yearly basis for argument's sake. So you have to show that there's a transition to fill this quota system based on the demographics of the country. But then you look at other teams as well, like, for example, Bafana Bafana, which is also a national soccer team. I don't know if there's any colored or Indian or white players in that team. I don't watch soccer, to be fair. But last I saw, there wasn't much, racial diversity in that team.
No,
so one has to wonder.
There's no diversity there. During the World Cup, they had one white player who's married to a black woman. Has mixed race kids, and he was a goalie, but they never let him on the pitch. He sat on the bench the entire World Cup in 2010. Even when it was clear they were losing or they were winning, he still sat on the bench. And yeah, there's no equity whatsoever. It's just ludicrous. I mean, if we play their little game, 10% of the FIFA team in 2010 should have been white. It wasn't.
Yeah, at least, but it's and this is where it gets interesting for me, because it's no longer about redress. It is about a takeover. It's a show of power, basically. There's no redress. I've stated earlier this week as well, when people say, yeah, but it's for the greater good, to try and tip the scales, as you said earlier. I said, well, the greater good is really predicated on what is best for everyone. It is rather predicated on which is best for those in power. So it's always going to be skewed for a minority and never for the majority. And that's what we're currently seeing in South Africa in regards to radical economic transformation laws and broad-based economic policies and so on. So, and then you get people that try to defend those policies and regulations and legislations. And I'm like, really, how do you then justify your stance against apartheid? Because they also had these same laws, legislations, and policies. It might have been worded differently, but it's still the same idea. It's still got the same foundation underneath it. You can't just decry a system of the past and then uphold the very same principles in a system of the future or the system of the present.
Well, let me a little secret out of the bag here to get people caught up. Here's the thing. This is not about equality and fairness. It's about supremacy is what it's all about. And that's what people don't want to talk about. It's no different than the Black Lives Matter movement here in the United States, where people were expected to bow in fealty to a thuggish domestic terrorist organization. I mean, now you have, once again, your vile minister of sports, culture, and utter nonsense. That's the title I give him, sports, culture, and utter nonsense. That would be Nati Mtetwa, is now looking at removing statues linked to apartheid and colonialism and transferring them to a theme park. Talk about insulting, condescending. Absolutely ridiculous. The point here is that idiots like Nati Mtetwa are supremacists, not interested in a rainbow nation, not interested in equality or sharing in South Africa's history. That's not what he's interested in. He's interested in wiping out one segment, if not more than one segment, of South Africa's history, its culture, and its people. And this is vile. The world's not paying attention, and I'm getting tired of it. I've been too quiet for too long.
Yeah, and also this is something that I told or tell a lot of people as well. The idea of equality for me is a bit faulty because, I'm not your equal in any or in many respects, the same as you're not my equal in many respects. And in that inequality, we are equals, right? Because I can do things that you can't do, and you can do things that I can't do. Therein we can find our equality. But what they're doing is and this is something that I've told you before we came online. I was busy reading this book, and this is something that I've read that the writer have said there. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in the United States, the pursuit of happiness is guaranteed, not happiness itself, right? But I think in South Africa, they try to guarantee happiness in and of itself instead of the pursuit thereof. And therein we find the issue. And that is when equality becomes a materialistic thing and not a societal thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that phrase famously comes from Declaration of Independence. It's
yes.
It's not guaranteed, so to speak. I get your point, but yeah, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness was from our Declaration of Independence from the United Kingdom because we were the first to break away as a colonist.
Yes,
we told them to foot sec a long time ago, and then
which was brilliant.
And then of course they came and burned our capital, bastards. Anyway, but
let's not open old wounds.
No, I think our wounds are not nearly as grievous as the Afrikaans people of South Africa have a much deeper wound with the British than we do. We're actually we're good friends with the Brits. Well, we were until the Resolute Desk was returned and Churchill's statue was returned by Barack Hussein Obama. But we're back in good stead with the Brits now that they've told the European Union to foot sec, which is
finally
good news for them.
I was hoping that more people would, or more countries would start to take back their sovereignty because, a country is only so good as it can decide its own course in its history. If you get what I mean. And for me, the European Union was transgressing on sovereignties that it had no right to transgress upon. You can't dictate to a nation what it can and cannot do within its own borders or within its own waters. That to me was just absurd. A country needs to be able to decide that for itself. And that was basically stripped away from the European Union. And also it was a very faceless union. Like, I don't even know who all the people were in that union. You've got this massive building with all the people sitting in the parliament and maybe one or two people, two key people that would help make the decisions. But I don't know who these people were. So I don't know how the Brits handled it or the French or so on and so forth. And I also don't know how the elections work over there.
Yeah, no, it's with the European Union. I've actually been there. I've been to NATO as well. I've been to Brussels dozens of times, in part because when I was in West Africa, it was the only way to fly to West Africa was Brussels Airlines, so I go through Brussels a lot. But I've also been there on official business. I've been to our American embassy. I've been to our embassy to the European Union. I've been to NATO headquarters. So I've been there quite a bit. The thing about the European Union is that it started out as a trading organization, the European Coal and Steel Community with Luxembourg, the Benelux, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium, and Germany were in it initially, and then France came in there too. But it later expanded and it became the European Community. Famously, they refused to let the United Kingdom in for 3 different times. 3 times the United Kingdom tried to get in. It wasn't until the 1970s when it finally became a member, 1972, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when they finally became a member. And there were plebiscites about it, but not when they actually went in. They actually went in without a vote from the British people, and they undermined their sovereignty by putting them in there. But at the time, it wasn't seen in that fashion because it was a trading bloc. And there's nothing wrong with the trading bloc. It reduced tariffs. It facilitated trade. It helped Europe grow. Makes all the sense. But then these elites, these global leftist elites come along who see something different. And honestly, I'll tell you, to be rather crass, the whole reason for the European Union is so that France and Germany don't kill each other all the time and go to war. I mean, that's
basically all. Yeah.
That's the bottom line. That's why it exists. Everyone else joined it because they wanted to accrue benefits. But you could see that it wasn't beyond the economic union. It wasn't something that everybody was sold on. I mean, Denmark never adopted the euro. The United Kingdom kept the British pound, the pound sterling, so they never fully came into it. The United Kingdom never signed up to the Schengen Agreement, which was the whole thing about open borders. And so you couldn't just rock up in the United Kingdom coming from mainland Europe because they weren't part of Schengen. So when they started the Brexit thing, of course, it was all portrayed as all white people who are all racist don't want brown people. Well, that's nonsense. That's the kingdom has 5 million people of color out of a 58 million population. I mean, that's for a country that had no brown people 200 years ago, that's quite a difference. And that's all post Second World War with the Windrush generation of Caribbean migrants coming first, then people coming from former colonies, from Africa and other places. The United Kingdom is a very different place. In fact, there's entire towns in the United Kingdom that were English are no longer English. Leicester is a minority English city. The majority of people are actually Africans in Leicester. It's more black than it is white, and also lots of Arabs and Indian subcontinent folks. So it's just the whole thing was the European Union was telling people how they could make their electrical outlet plugs, what shape they had to be in, how much coffee they could drink, sizes, things like that. It's just off the charts, and it kept stealing sovereignty, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I don't think again, coming back to that issue of migrants, for example, because that was basically what they hinged the whole anti-Brexit movement on, was in light of that, like you said, they branded those people that wanted their sovereignty back as racist because they didn't want the migrants. My question on it is, given the United Kingdom and its own sovereignty, why couldn't they decide how many migrants they would allow in without the interference of a larger body like the European Union? You don't need a bigger power to say to another, an equally great power, because let's face it, the United Kingdom is still a fairly great political power to contend with. You don't need to tell them how to do their business because they're sovereignty in and of themselves. Right, that's like me coming into your home and telling you how many people you need to allow into your home. You're going to kick me to the curb, and that's exactly what the United Kingdom did. They just said, no, look, it's not only the migrants though; it's a lot of these other smaller parts as well that form part of this whole exit union, you could say. And the people overlook the more technical side of it. Like again, they couldn't fish where they wanted to fish. They couldn't trade what they wanted to trade, or because there were embargoes or there were restrictions or whatever the case may be. And that's the big picture that a lot of people tend to overlook. It was all about, like you stated in the beginning, it was supposed to be about trade, not political power.
Not political union, exactly. And and we'll talk about the African Union in a bit, but that's the big distinction between the African Union and the European Union is most people in Africa seem to think the African Union is a replica of the European Union. It's not. It has no sovereignty whatsoever. It's a conversation club, but we'll talk about that. But with the United Kingdom, what pisses me off about this whole argument when they call people racist because they want sovereignty, I'm like, piss off, because here's the thing. The Brits were angry about migrants not when brown people rocked up on the shore, because brown people came in the 1950s with the Windrush generation from the Caribbean. And then Arabs came from Yemen and other places, and Indians, and millions came to UK. And yes, I know there were race riots in Brixton and places like that. There have always been tensions. Yes, and there are racists on all sides, but that's not what I'm talking about. Those people all came before the European Union ever existed as a European Union, as a political entity. But then what happened when it became the European Union? Suddenly, a flood of migrants from Eastern Europe. By the way, they're all white and Christian. And that's who they were angry about. 600,000 Poles live in the United Kingdom, maybe 800,000. We don't have the true figures because there's a number of illegal migrants there, but at least 600,000 out of 58 million are Poles. What are all these Poles doing there? Well, they're working all the Holiday Inn Expresses. They're working in the burger shops. They're working in other hotels, and they work very hard, and they make a contribution to British society. But that is one of the reasons why a lot of Brits are upset. So when they started talking about Brexit, they try to turn it into this because it corresponded with the time when Angela Merkel undermined European sovereignty and violated her own Grundgesetz, the basic law in Germany, the constitution, by allowing a flood of illegals flooding into her country and disrupting the sovereignty of Hungary, Austria, and others, and taking in all these people and burdening German taxpayers with expenses for people who aren't legitimate refugees. Wait, I said that. They're not legitimate refugees because refugee standard is the first safe harbor, the safe port you come to. So once they reached Turkey, it was over. They're safe.
Yeah.
Then they went on to Greece. Now they've broken the rules. Then they went in through Albania and former Yugoslavia and up through the Balkans and came up to Austria and into... No, that's not refugee. That is quality of life shopping, and it's not legitimate.
No, that's when you hear people say, for example, they're not refugees, refugees or asylum seekers in the strictest sense, they're economic refugees. And I always struggle to understand this term until someone basically explained it like you did. Up into a refugee is a person that comes up into a safe harbor, like you explained up until Turkey. Then they're no longer a refugee because they have safe harbor.
Yep.
But it's when they start to move from that safe harbor to other countries as well, breaking laws and the sovereignty of nations, or threaten the sovereignty of nations. That's when they're no longer considered legitimate refugees. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack with that as well, but I understand completely where people come from in that regard. I think a lot of these confusions really is about, the left just, let's call them the left, because it's also not correct to say that, but it's these vain, compassionate people that pretend to care about people that shut down the conversation. So people like you and me, for example, can't get around, sit together and have a decent conversation about this and get to know what the real issues are. And I think this is why we are at this crucial point in time where we are today. This is also why we see riots, for example, in America in regards to Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth. It's a fringe group that wants to shut down the actual conversation. I'm not going to get into the actual organization of Black Lives Matter because that is something totally different. It's Marxist in my opinion. And anyone that knows me knows that I am allergic to Marxism. So I don't want to talk about the organization, but I want to talk about the sentiment. Like, I understand where they're coming from with police brutality and stuff like that. Irrespective of the racial aspects, there are things that we need to consider and are things that we need to try and change within the society for the betterment of all, not just for a betterment of a specific group of people.
No, it's just I'm with you on that. But the thing is that these things are constantly distorted, and people, it's when. So here's the thing: a couple years ago, The Economist, which is a magazine I had a subscription for from 1985 until this year, I finally canceled it. It's nothing but leftist garbage drivel.
Yeah. Hate
America, hate the UK. All this fake diversity BS, and it's supposed to be a news magazine devoted to politics and economics, and it's gone so far I can't stomach it anymore. And it's not a cheap magazine to keep, so I've been paying them a lot of money for over 35 years. So piss on them. I'm done with it. And I have a position where I'll read things I disagree with, but I just wanted to vomit every time I read it now. It's just ridiculous. A couple years ago, they ran this article and said, oh, look at Canada. Canada is so generous to asylum seekers. America, under Donald Trump, hates people. They never let anybody in their country. They never take asylum seekers. Now, what they do is they play little games. Well, Canada took a higher percentage of asylum seekers than America did. Okay, so Canada, with its 30 million people, took in 0.0005% of its population of refugees, and we, with our 330 million people, took in 0.0004% of the population, which means you took in 40,000 and we took in 350,000. What is this moral equivalency nonsense? But beyond that, they held Canada up as an example. Look at how Canada does it. They're so compassionate. And then in the same issue of the magazine, they actually told the truth. Canada has a point system, which is what Donald Trump proposed for our system for immigrants, not for refugees. But Canada has a point system for refugees. They'll let you be a refugee if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a chemist, a physician, an engineer. And if you speak English, You have to speak English to be by and large. So Canada has a very preferential system, which uplifts Canada's economic performance and societal performance, whereas we are expected by the economists to take in the dregs of society. Nothing against the dregs. I'm sure they're lovely people. But we're expected to take in people with no skills, no experience, no resources, no money, and we're supposed to carry them. And they get to call themselves refugees when they've already got a safe harbor. No. That's BS. And this is what's going on with this. And when you say something about it, they paint you in a corner. But you know what? You can't paint me in a corner. It's like the guys who like, I got to share this one real quick, Dodgy. So a few years back, English, after 9/11, English was being bandied about as the official language for the US because we don't have an official language. So it was going to be the official language. And people were like, well, no. And I go to lunchtime at the Defense Intelligence Agency. I come back from my run at lunchtime, and I go down the newly renovated cafeteria, and I walk in and see some of the analysts who work for me. And I sit down. What are we talking about? Oh, we're talking about English again. Oh, yeah, English should be our national language. Oh, you just don't like Mexicans. Who said anything about Mexicans? Well, you're just a typical American. You're too lazy to learn a language. Actually, I speak 6 languages. Well, they're probably just European Romance languages. Actually, I speak 3 African languages. Booyah! Shut up. And then you can have a conversation. But I mean, that's what they try to do to people. They try to discredit you and play these silly games when they're the ones who don't know what they're talking about.
It's fascinating. Like, I didn't know that. But so what if look, again, you adopt languages like Rwanda as well, I know, is probably attempting to move, or probably have moved, from French to English as their official language.
Yep.
I'm not sure if they have already or if they still are going to. But again, that's a strategic move. That's a strategic decision because of economic possibilities, right? So you want to give to the people the most economic advantage that you possibly can as a country. So if that means you need to change an official language from French or from Spanish to English, which is by and large the language which is most commonly used in business. Like even I that work quite a lot with Africans, with other African countries, like
No, that's not for you, Dodgy. Someone asked it in the chat. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't want to say anything. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. But like for example, I have now, I'm how can I say, negotiating a contract in Gabon, and they contact us in English, right?
Right.
The official language is French,
yes,
but they contact us in English, and we're talking in English. When we're having a meeting in English, not in French. I think if I go and study, I still need to go and contact Ramon's mother, because I did ask him her number so that I can actually study French, because we are moving into the northern parts of Africa where French is more dominant. But I mean, even still, like countries with that official language are starting to adopt, an English language of some sort, whether it's American English or British English. It doesn't matter. It's English nonetheless. So I don't see the issue there. It's part of the communication. It's important to communicate with other people, and it's much easier if you talk the same language.
Well, it's part of the argument that the ANC, of course, will make for South Africa, but South Africa is a unique kind of case. It really doesn't fit for South Africa's case. There's no problem with English being an official language, but when you use that as the excuse to start discriminating against the other 10 official languages, like they've done it, removing the medium of instruction from the most renowned Afrikaans language institution, Stellenbosch, where you can't even take classes there anymore. It's not the median language. It's disgraceful. They've created, I guess, a Venda university, which is great for those who speak Venda, but why are they discriminating against everything else? And now, of course, when Afriforum and other groups are talking about forming an Afrikaans post-secondary school or technical school, oh, they're just racist. Why are they racist? Why are they racist?
But you know what's interesting here in Pretoria, for example, my nephew, he was staying with us for about 3 years while he was studying at Afriforum to become a millwright. And everything was given to him in Afrikaans. The Technikon was right over here in Roslyn, I think. Mm-hmm. And for them now to build the Afrikaans tertiary education facility, because I don't know if it's a university or if it's a Technikon, that's great for me, And coming back to Stellenbosch, it wasn't so much the government that that demanded it. It was the faculty of Stellenbosch that decided that they're going to get rid of Afrikaans as the teaching medium. So there, I hold them accountable for that, not so much the government. The government, to me, was in an official position was fairly quiet on that.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean.
No,
In the
absolutely.
unofficial positions, they were very loud. So you got your Sufis, for example, that would voice his opinion, but again, he's not speaking on behalf of the government there. So it's very, very important to understand that as well. I try to be fair where as much as I can be. Sorry, I'm falling over my words tonight. Wow.
Well, it's probably whatever it is you're drinking there. We won't discuss that. But
It's just Coke and
oh, okay,
ice. Trust
okay.
me, I'm sober. It's too early. Too early.
Sounds like Jack and Coke, but that's why with the ice bounce around there. But no, I'm not attacking the ANC on that one. There's plenty of things to attack the ANC on Stellenbosch, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about the fact that it is the premier institution known around the world as an Afrikaans university, and that's no longer the case. It wasn't the only
Yes.
one, but I mean, it is known for that, its reputation. And as a published author, published by Stellenbosch, I take offense to that. But anyway, my publication, of course, is in English, but no, the thing, you're right about that. But for me, I don't care whether it's the faculty or it's the students, because there were students crying about it too and protesting. And my position is this: if you're a Xhosa speaker, or if you're a Venda speaker, if you're an English speaker, and you apply to go to Stellenbosch, where the median is Afrikaans, and you come there, and then you're like, it's not fair. Well, why didn't you apply to go to UCT or go to UNISA or go to some other school? Why did you have to come to Stellenbosch? This is what happens when you allow yourself to be outnumbered, whether you're Afrikaans or you're Xhosa or you're Tswana. If you find yourself outnumbered, then you're voted down by people who come to your country and change your values and norms. And I find that problematic. And that's one of the issues with immigration. One of the great successes of America is that for centuries, immigration groups came to this country. If there was something important in their culture, they retained it and they inculcated their progeny. So, for instance, many of the Amish in this country still speak German as a first language. Because their children learn the Bible and they worship together, and they do homeschooling, or they have small schools and they're taught in German. They all speak English because that's the language of the land, but they speak German first. By the same token, lots of the old Spanish families who were in New Mexico and Texas and Southern California centuries before it became part of America, many of them still practice cotillion. They're Roman Catholics. They speak Spanish as a first language, but they all speak English. They're all Americans. So all these groups came here. They accepted the mores, norms, the values, the Constitution, our rules, our laws, our way of living. They didn't bring female genital mutilation with them. They didn't bring stoning with them. Excuse me. And they accepted our rules, and they assimilated into the society as a whole, but they retained their unique cultural distinctiveness when it was appropriate and they wanted to do it. And I'm okay with that. But when people come like Representative Ilhan Omar comes here and fraudulently defrauds us on immigration with a fraudulent asylum case, and who knows about her marital status, none of that. But she comes here and then she denigrates this country from the pulpit of our Congress after being elected in a duly elected in a democratic election, and she defrauds this country with the lies she tells. I got a problem with that sort of nonsense. You have no business being here if you don't want to be part of the team. Go find your own team. Don't try to change our team to reflect your broken ass country of Somalia. I didn't call it S-hole country. I called it a broken ass country.
Very important that as well. I don't know much about Omar. It's like I basically got into a brief spell of American politics recently because of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she's crazy. Sorry, she's not crazy. She's just socialist. But again,
there's a distinction.
Yeah,
there's a distinction between crazy and a socialist. Sorry, I'm all choked up laughing here.
But again, it's fascinating to me when I speak to. It's rare that I find a genuine socialist that understands the history upon which the movement is built, right? So I take her, for example. She's a socialist or socialist democrat, whatever she wants to call herself. It's socialist nonetheless. For me, if I look at the history of socialism, I can trace it back up until almost the French Revolution, right? And when you look at what happened in the French Revolution with all the people that were present there, you start to see socialist ideas and socialist tendencies form part of that. And that was really freaky to me. It's like, this is the beginning point from what I can see, where socialism actually began as an actual movement, like being practiced. Before that, it was always a sort of dream or a daydream of some sorts. It was daydream, but it was never attempted because I think the people understood that a utopia, a nowhere, that's what the word means, would not be able to exist because of the human factor, right? Humans are unpredictable. And as like Dostoevsky also writes, even if you put a person in the most comfortable positions, they'll do something unpredictable because they need that excitement in their lives. And I think that's probably what I admire from America. It's like they allow you to come in. Yes, there are rules like in any other country that you have to adhere to, but the possibilities for you are wide open. There's that sense of excitement, and that's what people want. That's why they come to America or go to America. But then you get like you said, Omar and AOC that want to change that to make it a safe space, but no space is really safe. If you look at the history of socialist movements, you're okay one day and the next day you're being dragged out of your home because you posted something online, like in Australia, and you're dragged off before you can get your sonar because you dared practice your freedom of expression or your freedom of speech. That's not the world I want to live in. I'm sorry,
No.
I want to live in a world where adults can make their own choices.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the whole thing going on right now, and we just could turn this into the whole discussion about the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19. This hysteria over this is taking away people's liberties and rights under spurious claims and utter nonsense, and no humility whatsoever among government officials anywhere in the world about how wrong they are. I mean, let's just run through the list of things that they got wrong. They told us in January, the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros himself, and the Chinese Communist Party told us in mid-January that this virus was not transmittable human to human. Really? That's what they told us. By the way, I'm not making this up. You can check out the World Health Organization website. It's all there, unless they've taken it down the last month or so because they're getting tired of being railed about it. They told us that. They also told us that China did an amazing job with the lockdown, and it set the gold standard. That's what Tedros said, the gold standard for what we should do in the future for a pandemic. And actually, China arrested doctors and nurses who tried to warn the government. And then others tried to use social media. They were also arrested and disappeared, most of whom we've never heard from again. And then they allowed at least 3 to 5 million people from Wuhan flee the city to the coastal cities where they took it, infected people in Hong Kong, which infected people on cruise ships. And then people got on planes, both Chinese and Europeans and Americans, and flew back to the rest of the world and Africans and brought the nonsense back with them because they didn't lock it down. Then they told us that this is so bad we have to shut the world down because the mortality rate's 3.25 to 3.45%. When in fact the mortality rate is 0.25 at most if you use the honest statistics. And we've actually known that since February. This isn't something we just discovered in August or September this year. They told us you couldn't give it to your pets. Then they come back and say you better keep your pets apart because you can give it to your pets. They tell us to stand 6 feet apart, 2 meters, when the actual effective distance from physicians of a sneeze is up to 24 feet. 6 meters, 7 meters, 8 meters. And then a cough goes 16 feet. So that's 3 or 4 meters. So why are we standing 2 meters apart? And then they told us, don't wear masks because masks are ineffective. Meanwhile, all of us allowed our mask and PPE to be shipped off to China while they covered their bottoms because they didn't have enough and they stole the rest from us. Now they bought it, but they essentially stole it by lying. They mapped out the RNA in January. They wouldn't share it with us for 9 days. That was 9 days that the virus spread around the world even more when we could have had information to make effective tests. The list goes on and on and on. And they just get it wrong all the time. Now we see that the CDC has lowered, and I'm not going to say the numbers because we'll get deplatformed, but they've lowered the figures from the 200,000 nonsense back to a more reasonable figure of actually how many people died. And when you see that, you see that this is all just political hysteria and clearly an effort to control people. It's sad.
It is sad, and I think this is where Eleutheria, for example, was so angry because like her and a few others, we could see where this was going to head. But speaking about the devastation, the economic devastation, I lost about 1/3 of my business because of this lockdown, and that 1/3 was because of people not really taking the lockdown very seriously. I saw the red flags coming up as I watched the news and stuff. So the other clients that really did take precautions, I said, look, we will need to look at ways of working, remotely. And some of them took me seriously, like I said, others did not. They thought, oh no, it's just whatever. And when the lockdown happened, they couldn't trade anymore. They weren't prepared. And by the time they were prepared, they had so much financial loss that they couldn't recover. Luckily, like I said, 2/3 of my business was retained, and I took up more business within this pandemic period. But again, if you look at how the NCC in South Africa just handled the situation, it's ridiculous. The tobacco ban for me was arbitrary. It was like, look, you're not going to stop smokers. They're going to find illegal cigarettes whether or not you like it. And the problem with that is it gives dominance to, let's call it, mobsters, right? We saw the examples in America during the Prohibition era with alcohol. Mobsters came into great power because of all the prohibition and because of the businesses they ran secretly for their liquor distilleries and their gambling. And that's why, eventually the US had to, what was that gangster's name?
Al Capone?
Yes, force him with the military to basically surrender. And that would have been a likely scenario in South Africa if this lockdown and these regulations were to extend further than they ought to have. In fact, they should not have been placed there in the first place. Because if I look at the Constitution as well, on the declaration of an emergency or disaster, the citizens should first and foremost be unable to help themselves. That's the key thing here, because I can wear a mask, I can buy sanitizer, I can still wash my hands, I can still take precautions for myself, right? So the government had no right actually to step in and say, these people can't take care of themselves. It's when it's gotten to a point where our health facilities or so on would crash and burn. But they said, oh no, it will crash and burn. No, it won't crash and burn, because that's a future prediction. You can't predict the future with the numbers that you have, because at the time when they made that prediction, we really didn't know much about the virus.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
So it was just an excuse to grab power. That's what it was.
No, there's no doubt about that, especially in the South African context. In the American context, it's a little different. To me, it's all about destroying Orange Man bad, because after their fraudulent impeachment trial, which, by the way, not a single crime was cited in the articles of impeachment. Everything that they accused Donald Trump of was a political issue, not a crime. He didn't violate the Constitution. He didn't violate any federal laws, none whatsoever. So it was fraudulent on its basis. It was simply an effort, like they tried to get rid of Andrew Johnson after the Civil War because they didn't like him, and it was a political one. So once again, political, and the right thing happened. Whether Donald Trump is a good guy, a bad guy, whether he's a cad or he's the right guy, doesn't really matter, because he wasn't being tried for a crime. He was being tried for politics, and he won. And after he won in middle of January, he was going to a landslide electoral and popular vote victory, because people had seen this for what it was. And all 3 years of them undermining the administration, diverting resources from the White House, which should be focused on domestic and foreign policy. And then you run through the list of all the things Trump has accomplished. In the face of that, it's just astounding. Imagine if they hadn't been trying to undermine him and they've been legitimate and honest and reported shortcomings. I mean, I talk about his shortcomings. Where the hell's my wall at? I want a wall. You promised me a wall. I don't care who pays for it. Give me a damn wall. And what about the deficit? $1 trillion a year? I'm sorry, that's too much. You need to fix that.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot.
You need to fix that. That's more than half the countries in the world, their entire annual GDP. No, but so I mean, there are legitimate reasons to criticize Trump, but they don't talk about that. You know why? Because they like deficit spending. They only use the wall to say he failed, and they don't even talk about that anymore. But it just drives me nuts. Let me get some of the chat here real quick, Dodgy. A lot of people are saying that, the world fell for it. Clinton says, they're very sad the world fell for it. Yeah, but not everybody did. And then Swearim DJ, who's in the Netherlands, says Het Wilders and Thierry Baudet both wanted a lockdown. They're right-wing leaders. Well, you'll hear me say, I talk about leftists, but I say hysterical politicians. In this country, it's mostly leftists, but it's not exclusively leftists around the world. There are a lot of stupid right-wing politicians, too. These people that will... people and fear is a funny thing. When people fear things, they okay, take away my freedom, lock me up. I don't leave the house. No. Those things are too hard fought for. You can't simply surrender those liberties without a question. And what I mean by that is not just to be difficult, but when you ask legitimate questions, why can't? So here in the States, when we have a lawful protest at the Harrisburg, the Capitol here in Pennsylvania, people show up, they're maintaining social distance. Some of them wore masks, some didn't, because masks hadn't been prescribed at that point. But some people were just being, proactive. And people carrying signs protesting the behavior of the governor, who forced businesses in most of the state to shut down and threatened the owners with imprisonment if they opened up their businesses. And then he went so far as to accuse mayors and county administrators and business owners. He called them cowards in the face of an unseen enemy, as if this clown ever served in uniform, this governor of this state. So they're protesting that, and they're painted by the national media and everyone is right-wing racist, white supremacist. When I see the video, and there's a lot of black folks out there who are protesting, a lot of other folks out there protesting. We don't have many Asians around here, but yeah, it's mostly black and white folks. And you see lots of people out there, and they're behaving themselves. By contrast, people march in our city centers with no mask on, rubbing shoulders with each other, attacking police officers, beating citizens in the streets, shooting people, murdering, raping, declaring self-declared autonomous zones, which is sedition and treason. And they're hailed as doing it because it's right, because it's in the name of social justice. What a bunch of horse manure that is. And I think that's what people are so frustrated with.
This brings me to something else as well that I've read. Egalitarian envy. I think it's from Helmut Schmitz or something like that. Very, very interesting book, where he says, for example, politicians have taken up the mantle of pointing out an envious to point the envious nature of man to a specific cause, and to then say that there is a problem within society, and then put themselves as these sort of people that will bring forth the change that will change the society or change the situation in a social justice manner. This is where we get the term social justice from, for example, because it's society at large, and they have this warped concept of justice. Again, if you look at the French Revolution as well, it's all to do about egalitarianism instead of fairness. And this is also where I think I butt heads with most people. I'm all for equality before the law, or fairness before the law, because I want people to be treated fairly, not, how can I say, with specialty, or with a special regards to whether they were previously disadvantaged or advantaged, or however you want to put it. I want them to be handled fairly. What counts for me must count for you, must count for the next person, and so on and so forth. That's it. That to me is equality. That to me is fairness. But apparently that's not what they want. So they created these autonomous zones, and I watched it and I thought to myself, if they declared that an autonomous zone, then by all rights, the American state or government can switch off all the water and all the electricity because it's now an autonomous zone. It needs to now come to the table and do what the rest of the autonomous zones do, and start to negotiate.
It's funny you mention that, because when that nonsense started, and on my streams, I said, well, this is a pretty simple solution, because somebody said, what do you do? So that's very simple. I turn off all the utilities. I erect barriers around the self-declared autonomous zone. And then when they come out bedraggled and hungry and starving and filthy and smelly after 2 weeks, then we arrest them for sedition and treason. We imprison them. We charge them. If they can make bail, and if they're not a threat to society, we let them make bail. Otherwise, they stay incarcerated. Then we try them. And then they go to jail for 40 or 50 years for their treason against the United States. Very simple. Turn off the... This whole thing would end in 24 hours if you turn off the cell phone towers. No mobiles, no social media. It's all over. It is all over. Because who are they going to whine to? Who are they going to tell about their nonsense? And that's what it's all about. Ooh, look at me. I'm so woke. I'm so cool. Look at me. I'm a non-binary, super transgender, this, that, yeah. Come on. Utter nonsense.
And then they created this communal garden in the park, I think. It was in the park. And I looked at it, I'm like, even myself as a rookie gardener, I was like, no, the first rains that would come would wash that away. So no, they clearly didn't know what they were doing. They should have gotten at least, if they wanted to be autonomous and stuff like that, and they wanted to do their fruit salad, they should have asked one of the old ladies that, did gardening at least, to come and help us, like teach us how to do the gardening stuff, at least do something right? But no, they didn't even do that. They were like, no, these old ladies, what do they know? We're socialists and we're anarchists and whatever. Yeah, fine.
Well, and you see this exposed for what it is. I've exposing Black Lives Matter for what it is. It's a racial supremacy group bent on distorting history. It's not bent on equality. And we see this right away in Portland, for instance, where was Seattle, where the self-declared autonomous zone, where it was. Within a week of declaring it, they segregated the population inside their zone. So we spent the last 6 decades ending segregation legal segregation, and actually going beyond that and unlawfully, in my view, intruding into private organizations and forcing private organizations to accept anybody regardless of what their standards were for the club, because it was unfair, which I think goes beyond our Constitution, but I understand why they did it, but I don't agree with it. Anyway, but the point is that so we spend 6 decades ending legal segregation, only to have jackasses like this show up and go, only black people can come in here. Excuse me?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So we had a few years ago when the Ferguson, Missouri thing took place in 2015, when that guy was shot by the cop, and it was all lies. Hands up, no, hands up. He charged the cops. It was on video, dozens of witnesses. They lied about it in the press. They created racial tension and strife by the racist in chief, Barack Obama, and his racial nonsense, his victims. Anyway, so that all happens, right? And on the University of Missouri, on the campus there, when they go into the campus, they were in there in the dormitories, they're filming. It's everybody lives in a dorm. And they're downstairs in the common area, which the common area is paid for by fees for paying for residential living and university fees, right? So any student who lives there can use it. That's why it's there. So they're down there and they're like, we're down with the struggle. We're down with the struggle. And all these leftist, liberal, uber heartstrings college students who are white who are there until they were kicked out because they're not black. Excuse me? Excuse me? And this is about equality of opportunity. This is where people were hoodwinked. We thought that ending apartheid was so that everybody be treated with an equal opportunity, equality of opportunity, not equality of outcomes. But no, it's about racial superiority. And it's funny how people were angry about it when it was white folks pushing it, but now it's white folks pushing black supremacy and blacks pushing supremacy in this country. Not most black Americans, not involved in this. Most black Americans, 95% of, if not more, are good, honest, hardworking people who don't believe in any of this nonsense. But if you take a look at the BLM stuff here in the States, 80% of the people on the streets aren't black. They're privileged, white, little whiny, wet nappy wearing turds.
And here I think, how can I put this very straight? Let me put this straightforward.
Okay.
So I think this happened when there was this, let's say it, an infiltration towards the universities, a sort of a political movement within the universities, and this skewed a lot of the views that people had, especially in the universities. Because, like I said, when I was on Joe's show, afterwards, Joe and I talked, and I said, look, what bothers me about all this white privilege nonsense and things like that, and the redefinition of words, is that you're fresh out of school. You have zero exposure to life. You're still protected by your parents and so on. Now you're thrust in the university, and these books are put in front of you, and these definitions are put in front of you. You don't want to cause trouble, right? You just want to get through it. So you just accept it. But there are people there that don't think outside of the box and say, wait, let me make sure about these facts. They accept it as is. And that's when they radicalize, can we say, a lot of these people. And again, it's not a majority of the people, it's a fringe minority. If you put them all together, they would probably fill a rugby field. But they're super organized, and they know what they're doing. And they are subverting society and the pillars that uphold the society. And I think we need to start to speak out on that. That's why I started to go, head to head with people that put definitions down that aren't the real definitions. One example is when Oxford Languages, which by the way Google uses for definition of their words, put down capitalism as both an economic and political system. And I was like, no, it's not that. Capitalism is an economic system.
Correct.
That's it. Don't pull your political bullshit on us here, because I'm not comfortable with that. And then they just made the button refresh the form after I complained about it. But I know what they're doing. So I think people need to realize that that's where it starts. It starts with the tertiary education systems. That's where they've infiltrated. That's where when people are the most vulnerable to this sort of ideology. But one thing that I can probably give kudos to America in regards to YouTube is that they've started to expose this much more rapidly than they have in South Africa, for instance. And I think there's a good pushback from your guys' side, at least in America, on that. And people are starting to speak out. I'm starting to see a sort of light at the end of the tunnel there.
No, absolutely. So just taking a look at this. So here's the definition that shows up when I do a Google search of capitalism. says an economic and political system which concentrate industry controlled by private owners for profit. Whereas I will give credit to Wikipedia, it is current and up to date. It says capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production. And that's exactly what capitalism is. It's not a political system. Those are just lies. That's why it's so irritating me to hear Barack Obama get up. Capitalism has failed. No, your unwarranted intrusion into the marketplace, distorting market outcomes with the Community Fairness Act or Community Reinvestment Act, which forced bankers to lend money to people who could not pay back their loans because of the color of their skin and their socioeconomic basis, which has no place in a normal world. If you want to help those people, then give them grants. If you want to help those people who are disadvantaged, don't force banks to go into business with people who can't pay their bills, because then you undermine their business model, which is what they intended to do. The entire 2008 financial collapse is a direct result of congressional interference in the capitalist system with the creation of parastatals like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which had the implicit government guarantee. So whenever Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac went into the marketplace to borrow money, because banks borrow money, they borrowed money from investors so that they could issue loans. They did that. They got 1/4 to half a basis point lower interest rates than any commercial bank, even the best commercial bank. Blue ribbon commercial banks couldn't get money as inexpensively as those institutions backed by the government. Now that's an unfair advantage, and that costs billions of dollars every year in profits. So what do commercial banks have to do? Charge higher rates. And then they're forced to take on clients who can't pay it, because otherwise they will be denied their banking charter because they're not helping people who are less fortunate. No, that's the whole thing that drives me nuts. It's these lies about everything, distortions. Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty and created more ingenuity, more inventions, more advances in human medicine and science, technology, ease of living, quality of life than any system that's ever existed in mankind. It is a perfect system if it is allowed to operate properly.
Yes, and this is something I also want to touch on. For example, they'll say yes, but it's end stage capitalism, or capitalism's end stage, and I think to myself, let's take monopolies for example. They're crying against monopolies, right? But a monopoly can only exist as long as a government creates laws, regulations, and policies that protects that monopoly. So they're on one side, they're decrying monopolies, which I agree with. Monopolies are bad. But then they go and say the only solution to monopolies is more state. I don't know how do you get to that? We need more state regulation against monopolies, but the state was the problem to begin with that created these monopolies. No.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the case with South Africa, one of the reasons why, of course, that two factors here. Number one factor is a monopoly. The second, I mean, there's no competition. The second is, so they're not driven to be better or produce better rates or produce a better product or reach more customers. I'm talking about Eskom in particular. When there are other viable options out there. So people have to dance around the rules that the government has created, creating, off-grid stuff rather than allowing other energy producers to come in. I mean, listen, the Chinese would love to come into South Africa and build power plants and sell power to South Africans and burn South African coal, and they make a buttload of money. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying they would love to do that. But my point is that they can't compete because the state-owned monopoly, and the state blames it on capitalism. It has nothing to do with capitalism. You control everything. You control the electric plants. But here's the distinction, and this is what gets lost on people the world over, but especially people born after 1990 who are being indoctrinated and inculcated with nonsense in our schools around the world. The role of government is not to take care of you. You see, ladies and gentlemen, thousands of years ago, there were no governments. There were just bands of people roaming about, killing springboks and eating berries, or, stupidly eating pufferfish and dying from the poison because you didn't know it was poisonous. That's what people are doing. They're knocking boots, they fight with their neighbors, they move on, they relocate because of pressure, and they find another place, and they expand as settlers, as colonists. That's how we populated the world. Anyway, so eventually we're like, hey, there's too many of these neighbors over here, and they're causing us problems, and maybe they're raiding our place too often. So people form governments for common needs, defense, policing, things like that. The role of government is not to take care of you or me, Dodgy. The role of government, you know this, I'm preaching the convert here. Yeah. But the role of government is to ensure a level playing field. so that everyone has an equal opportunity to excel or fail or to fail. It's not the role of government to protect companies like buying out General Motors when it should have gone bankrupt. It's not the role of government to have parastatals like Escom, which crushes competition, no innovation. The board is stacked full of corrupt patronage hires and people siphoning money off from it because it's not a for-profit institution governed by a board that's independent and by shareholders that will vote all the clowns out if they fail.
See, I think, well, I'm going to disagree a little bit there because I also don't.
No. This is my channel. This is my channel. You can't just, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't really believe also in this whole equality of opportunity based on my view of like no one is really equal in ability or in situation. Every person is unique in that regard. But I do believe in fairness. Again, I want people to be treated fairly. Right? If you are more qualified to enter into an opportunity than I am, then obviously you need to get that opportunity, right? Government's role in my view is to protect my rights from threats, both domestic and foreign, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was saying there, but I think we're caught up on vocabulary. So the phrase I use, which I think you won't dispute with, is the government's role is to ensure a level playing field. Would you agree with that?
No, let's agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I mean by equality of opportunity. In other words, if I want to apply for a tender with the government and you want to apply for the tender and I'm colored and you're white,
yes.
It should stand. We should both have the opportunity to apply for that. If you want to go to UCT and I want to go to CT, we should both apply. The fact that I didn't bother to graduate high school and I'm illiterate means I'm not going to get in. I shouldn't get an equal chance. I should have equal chance to apply to it. It should be available to everyone. That's what I mean by equality of opportunity. Not everyone has, not putting everybody at the same point in the race. We don't start at the same place because we all have different natural abilities. That's just the nature of life.
Okay, no, then there I can agree. I can actually agree. Because then actually what you're advocating and I'm advocating is the same thing. I knew
that. You just hung up on vocabulary.
Yeah, sorry, man. Sorry. Yeah. But no, it's well, I think I'm hung up with the vocabulary because I'm dealing with a lot of people that want us to start at the same starting point or want us to end at the same ending point or more or less. And, I'm so, how can I say, used to that sort of approach that whenever I hear it, it's like, oh, no. So I do apologize for that.
No need to apologize. I just want to make sure that we are drinking the same Kool-Aid is what I'm trying to get at. It's the way the phrase is. And you're right. It's important to make a distinction because people twist words all the time. And so I think probably the best phrase I've always used is a level playing field. It's responsibility of government to ensure a level playing field. So you don't allow monopolies to take unfair advantage of organizations. But if a company's the best company and it runs away and it crushes its competition, you also don't punish them for that.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I also see a lot of people do is, or think, especially in South Africa, like they said, well, funding will be given to aiding businesses through the private sector. But when you look at it, it's not really the private sector that'll help. It's more, again, it's the public sector. It's an entity backed by government, owned in the public sphere, no longer a private owner or a group of private owners. It's so mind-boggling that people, again, are taken up with this. They think, oh no, this is true because the government said so. But when you actually look at it, it's like, no, it's just another way of funneling money from the private sector into the public sector, into the pockets of these politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the problem. It's not exclusive to South Africa. It's France, it's Germany, it's the United Kingdom, it's the United States, it's Australia. Take your pick. It's definitely China. It's definitely China. But I mean, that's not ensuring a level playing field. That's corrupting the playing field to your advantage, and that's the worst corruption. Betraying the public trust for personal gain, benefit, or fame. And we see that all the time. It's really, really sad. That's not the role of government. By the way, folks, I stuck the link into the Dodgy Idealist channel. I didn't realize you only had 40 subscribers with me. But folks, take a moment and check that out and check out his videos. I have to say this. I wore this lovely, the Fight Cancer Bulls jersey today. Not because he's in Gauteng, but because he has really awesome artwork for his videos on his channel, and I'm quite envious of it. Mine's kind of lame compared to his. So well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I actually like the wheat stocks and stuff, but that's more for religious purposes. But yeah, I really like that. Yeah.
What's this?
All right.
So someone listing as Blood and Soil says, why is it that you object to black only segregation when you have no objection to female only rules, especially when men only is banned? I don't know who he's talking
Um,
to, and I don't know who anybody
well,
that professed that. Hmm.
well, okay. Let's quickly tackle that as well. I have a disdain for any sort of segregation.
Yep.
For me, it should be voluntary. If I want to be part of your group and you want me to be part of your group, then why should I be excluded from that, except on maybe, let's say, private institutional grounds? Because let's face it, there are clubs that would only allow men because it's traditionally only men in that club. That's probably what golf was as well in
Hmm.
very, very early ages of its development. Many sports actually, for that matter. But you do get men-only clubs, you do get women-only clubs, but those are private institutions. Those aren't governing institutions. The problem
Exactly.
comes in governing institutions that try to, or public institutions, let's rather say that, because public also covers um, sectors like education and other means, like other public entities, not necessarily controlled by government, but owned in the public interest. Um, that's when I have a problem with that, because you're now excluding portions of the public.
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
absolutely. Well, like a good example here is where this nonsense, the direction it goes. So it's always funny how it's always targeting only a specific group when we're exclusive. I don't ever recall anybody complaining about the black fraternities and sororities when I was an undergraduate in 1982, only allowing black students to rush their organizations. Now they didn't have a formal policy of that, but if you showed up and you're white and you wanted to rush, you'd be like, "What are you doing here?" And
Yeah.
so it was informal. But I'm not criticizing black fraternities and sororities. That's not it at all. But the Boy Scouts of America, the Boy Scouts of America was forced to allow girls into it. But no one ever made a complaint about the Campfire Girls not allowing boys, the Girl Scouts of America not allowing boys. Both of those organizations still do not allow boys to participate. And we're not talking about with the Scoutmasters. There have been female Scoutmasters involved with the Boy Scouts for ages because there's mothers, of course, and that sort of thing.
Mm.
But they forced a private organization, which was founded for the betterment, the education, the maturation of young boys. Why? Because boys tend to be mischievous, and that's one of the reasons why Robert Baden-Powell came up with the Scouts concept. And so it was to teach them responsibility and teamwork and behaving themselves. And so they intrude into the private sector, into a private organization which has nothing to do with the government, and force it. And they had to give in because of lawsuits. So now the Boy Scouts of America is essentially dead. It's an institution that's been around for a century, and I was a Boy Scout. I was a Weeblo, and I learned great values from it about my country. But there were other organizations girls could join. I was in 4-H, which is an agricultural organization largely, which is for farm kids, where you learn it's for heart, hand, health, helping, all that stuff. Anyway, it's an organization in which we work together. We have clubs. We prepare for local county fairs and things like that, state fairs. And it's a social organization as well. And kids learn. They have lots of responsibility. So there's lots of things out there. Why are these people always trying to tear down things, but only trying to tear down things that are for males and for white males at that, for the most part? No one's screaming about letting boys into the Campfire Girls. Why not? That's crazy.
Yeah, if it counts for the Boy Scouts, which is a private organization, it must count for other private organizations within that very same framework as well.
Exactly.
This is something that, for example, this ties back onto the freedom of expression here in South Africa. So the old flag of South Africa was considered hate speech, right?
That's nonsense. It's not.
But
Let me interrupt you real quick, Dodgy.
yeah,
I take great exception to that, not as a South African,
yeah,
not because I like the flag, because I think it's ugly.
no,
Sorry,
no,
but
you and I
because
agree on that.
yeah, because it's
Uh,
nonsense. It's just it's the Union flag. It's not hate
yeah,
speech.
yeah. So it was declared hate speech. But here's the thing. Prior to that, a few years before that, there was a guy or a girl, I don't know what they are anymore.
Hmm.
I called him with D Martin. I called him an ugly person, or them an ugly person, because that's how they are. They made an artwork where they wrote "fuck white people"
Yep, I
in
saw
black
that.
letters on a white canvas, right?
Saw that. That's not
And
hate speech.
that's not hate speech. But if the flag now, which is now a symbol of hate speech, which to me is utter nonsense. But if that now constitutes as hate speech, then that artwork needs to be revisited.
Yeah,
You see, this
absolutely.
is this is what people don't understand is whatever you've declared in the past creates the precedent of the present and the future.
Mm-hmm.
So if the flag is now hate speech, then whatever is declared in the past as not hate speech, but as the freedom of expression and as art, must then also be revised, because it cuts both ways.
Yeah, but the problem is that with these woke warriors, these social justice warriors, and these leftists, reason doesn't matter, facts don't matter. You know, it's utter nonsense. It drives me nuts. You know, so let me give you an example of something else here. So General Colin Powell, lifelong Republican apparently, or so he says, flirted with running for presidency. He probably would have won the presidency if he'd run long before Barack Obama, and it wouldn't have been anywhere near as disastrous as Obama's presidency was. But Colin Powell, who served under the first Bush as, Secretary of State, and he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In 1992, when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I was an officer, a lieutenant serving the Army, he signed the orders to send the active duty troops to California to assist the LA County Sheriff and the LAPD Police Department, as well as activated the California National Guard to assist over the Rodney King riots, right? Over riots. Now, people weren't being killed. Shops were being looted. People were being injured. But people weren't being killed by and large. By contrast, a couple of months ago, when Donald Trump said that if these mayors and governors don't get control of their cities, then the federal government's going to have to do something, step in. By the way, we have provisions for that. We have the Insurrection Act. We also can declare martial law, and there are provisions. But Trump didn't do any of that. He just said it's something to consider, and he would look at doing it if things weren't policed up. General Powell writes an op-ed, and he goes on TV, he's interviewed on TV, and he says that he's violating the Constitution, he's violating the law, he's out of control, he doesn't know what he's doing, he has no authority to do this. Well, you stupid jackass, in 1992, you signed orders directing federal troops to police the inner cities of Los Angeles to put down riots and activated the California National Guard under federal orders. And you're going to tell me, because Donald Trump suggests that an armed insurrection, which a seditious group is declared an autonomous nation inside our own country, doesn't warrant? Oh, please. See, there's no common sense here. And there's no sense of history. See, these idiots don't know history, and so they think the rest of us have forgotten it. I've lived through the Cold War. I've lived through Soviet oppression. I've lived through all this nonsense. I know what this is all about, and you're not going to hoodwink me.
Yeah, and that's the thing, though. We're getting to a very important thing. Like I said, not many socialists that I engage with know the history of socialism.
Yeah.
And okay, I've never lived through depression and so on and so forth. But from what I could see and what I could read out of history books, it wasn't a fun time. And from what I can, and the same applies to socialism and so forth, from what I can see and what I can read, it's not a fun time. It's not a good thing. I don't know why people would advocate for socialism and so on, but they probably do have their reasons. But once you start to confront them with the facts, I like how they then all of a sudden, how can I say it, move back and say, oh, but that wasn't real socialism, or that was a different time. Or,
this time we'll get it right.
Yes. I'm always astounded with that. And when you look at it, like Venezuela, for example, that was hailed as, even with Bernie Sanders, I don't know if people remember this, but even Bernie Sanders said, like, oh, this is a great country. This is like when socialism started. This is a great country. This is going to be like the blueprint of all countries. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he praised the government. And where's Venezuela today?
No,
where's Brazil today?
Well, speaking of that, Dodgy, I'm going to have on my channel probably by the end of the month a kid named Daniel DiMartino. He's a Venezuelan refugee, a political asylum seeker who came to the United States, and he's outspoken. He's gotten so well known now in circles that you have to book him. So I had to book him through. But anyway, he'll be on my channel. We were going to do it this week, but I missed the email. It was too late, and then he was already traveling. So we'll do it later in the month. He's going to come on and talk about what happened in Venezuela. He's 17 years old, well, 18 now, and he grew up under that nonsense. And he watched Venezuela go from a prosperous, wealthiest country in all of Latin America to the worst S-hole country in all of Latin America. It's just an utter disaster, and it's all because of socialism, because the socialism is all about enriching the elites. That's how they stole, and they used socialism as an excuse, and the idiot population were hoodwinked into it, just like they're being hoodwinked by people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar and all these other people or telling them it's nonsense. And I, for the life of me, it can only be because education is so broken. When I see people who have no concept about this stuff and no sense of proportion or history, the millions of people. What about all the Ukrainians that were murdered as kulaks or sent to the gulag because they owned 2 chickens and a cow by the Soviets when they wanted to steal their land and collectivize it? 20 million people. Nobody's talking about that. 20 million people.
Yeah.
The damn Soviets killed more of their own people than the Nazis did by a wide margin.
Yeah, and that's just the Soviets.
The Chinese cultural revolution. Yeah, the list goes on.
Yeah, so I was about to say, let's not even talk about the CCP and what they did.
Kampuchea
and
Cambodia.
Yeah, it's equally horrific because we're talking about human life, and when you look at all these things, you think to yourself, wow, these people really are advocating for something that they have no idea what they're actually advocating for.
Yep.
And to be fair, I'll also admit this. When I was younger, I used to think that communism was cool. Thank God I got a brain and I woke up.
Well, you're not alone. Marabani is a reformed communist, and it's thank God that he finally actually drank some water that didn't have mercury in it, and he got healthy.
Yeah, well, he's actually much more. I'll admit this. He's much more intelligent than I am, and he's much more involved in the philosophical sort of and historical sort of thinking that goes on in this. So whenever he talks, I listen. I might disagree here and there on some issues, but overall, I think he has a very, very good picture of what constitutes as socialism or Marxism or whatever the case may be. And this is something else as well that people tend to not think about. Communism or Marxism didn't start with Karl Marx. It goes way back. It goes way, way back. Last night, for example, I said to my other guest that I had on my podcast, this very same question of redress or redistribution came up in the, early medieval times, especially in the Eastern Church. And I think it was St. John Chrysostom that said this when it comes to charity, for example. He said, charity relies on 2 things, willingness and gratefulness. And the story that he told was, if the poor petition to the king to take from the rich what they perceive as rightfully theirs, and the king does this through force, then the rich will grow resentful of the poor, and the poor will grow resentful of the rich because they will, expect that which is theirs to be given to them without gratitude. And that shows you that this problem is from way back even then. So socialism really has roots further back than Karl Marx, further back than the French Revolution. But you can see the effects of the French Revolution, or where the idea of socialism was started to become enacted, become realized, you could say.
And Doc Brecker just put something here. I was going to mention this earlier, but this glorification of Che Guevara, who was an interloper, who was a scoundrel, who was a piece of crap. He was a murdering rapist and all these other things he did. Yet the left in the 60s and 70s glorifying Che Guevara, who's always sticking his nose in other people's business and causing chaos. But that whole thing, so he says Che Guevara's t-shirts, he said, similar to the kids wearing rocker t-shirts with the pop band Hanson on the name, Hanson on it, but Nirvana at the bottom. And the kids don't even know who Kurt Cobain was. Well, not a fan of Nirvana. Sorry, Ronaldo Jose, not a fan of Kurt Cobain, just a bunch of drug addicts, not my kind of music. Sorry, the grunge scene I found to be quite grungy. Ooh, there goes all my subscriber base. Anyway, but but the point is well taken, Doc Breaker, is that they have no idea what they're talking about, who they're supporting, what they're behind. It's like, so we're not defending apartheid here, but the application of the word apartheid to describe racial discrimination in South Africa, when that was not the intent of it, and that was not what it was supposed to be all about. Now, the application of it's a very different story, but anyway, so it's just people distorting things. It drives me nuts. It's kind of like the whole conversation when Mugabe would always say, one settler, one bullet. And I said, well, you're going to have to order a lot of bullets because you got to kill 14 million people because there's only about 5,000 San left in the entire country. So all you Ndebele, especially, who came from South Africa, and all you Shona, who came down during the trek down the Rift Valley centuries ago, and all the Europeans can piss off because that country belongs to the remaining 5,000 Bushmen who still live in Zimbabwe. One settler, one bullet. There you go.
It's maddening. It's like, and then you still get people that revere him as a sort of hero. And I'm thinking to myself, you do realize you're talking about a person that was actually a dictator. But let's not even beat around the bush. He was a dictator, and he forced starvation upon his people because of the forceful land grabs that he, sanctioned, basically forcing farmers from their land without compensation. Now the country is like lower than rock bottom, and people are actually fleeing the country out of necessity, not out of, how can I say it, because they dislike it, for frivolous reasons, for very legitimate reasons, and when you mention that, you're branded as a racist. Like you.
No, it's just utter nonsense. And the reason why the farm invasions took place in Zimbabwe is because there was nothing left to loot. The ZANU-PF had stolen everything they could from the economy and crippled it. So the only sector of the economy that still had anything to it and where they could divert attention, well, that's one reason, was to go after the farming sector. But the other reason is that Mugabe's feelings were hurt. Because what happened is that in 1999, there was a referendum which would essentially have given the president total control of the government. The parliament would have been a rubber stamp. They would have had no authority. Whatever the president decided would be the rule, would be the law of the land. And so Mugabe, cocky, arrogantly, assuming that, people love him for what he's done for the country, they put this out there. And this referendum was defeated. It was defeated because the Movement for Democratic Change campaigned against it. And a number of white commercial farmers were fed up at being forced to sell their maize below market prices to the government marketing, the grain marketing board. And then those officials took that same maize and say it was $8 a bushel, sold it for $10, which was the market price, pocketed the $2, pushing the farmers into poverty or into borrowing money from banks. Sometimes they made enough money. Sometimes they didn't about that. But they had enough of it. And they actually thought they lived in democracy. And so none of them started joining and supporting the Movement for Democratic Change. Others did so clandestinely, not illegally. They just didn't advertise they're doing it. And Mugabe's like, you bastards, you betrayed me. I was magnanimous. I let you stay here after Rhodesia. And I treated you with kindness. And this is how you repay me. And that's how he repaid white Zimbabweans, by having them tortured, murdered, assassinated, driven off their land. By the way, 42% of all that commercial farmland in Zimbabwe, designated as such by the government, ZANU-PF government, was land purchased after 1980 with Mugabe and ZANU's permission. And by the way, they murdered 20 to 50,000 people in Matabele land from 1983 1986. Just a little small, genocide going on there we didn't talk about. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's also something. But I also want to point something out, because we're talking about expropriation without compensation.
Sure.
There's a reason why, for example, the EFF have started to push for the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, right? So they're very, very strategic as well. These I'm going to call them bastards, because that's how I feel about them. They first pushed for expropriation without compensation, and whether it was the ANC or whether it was the EFF, it's irrespective right now. And the reason for that is ultimately the aim for the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. Because in that movement, if they ratify or if they amend Section 25 of the Constitution, they can expropriate the Reserve Bank without compensation. Because remember, property in that Section 25 is not limited to land, unless, like I told D. Martin as well on our conversation, unless they explicitly make it for land, which I highly doubt. It's not going to be just for land. It's going to be for any property. And property can be anything. It can be the money in your account. It can be your car. It can be I've been warning about that from the outset. This is all smoke and mirrors. The whole intent here is to distract people about the land issue, which is legitimate. But what I mean by legitimate, that they could take your land. But what they're coming for is your retirement accounts, your cash in your bank, your car sitting in your front yard, or your garage, if the Brews here, garage, instead of garage. But they're also going to come for your stocks, your bonds, your jewelry. They can take anything without justification with this law. And this is why I think that the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act should be suspended to South Africa, which will affect $20 billion in exports and imports from the U.S. So piss on them. That's out of control. By the way, I was at Variable Vision, I think, said that I'm okay as long as I like Creedence Clearwater Revival and Metallica. Not a fan of Metallica, but CCR all the way.
If you want,
Yeah, we can do that.
if you want metal bands, I'm more a fan of German. The Scorpions and Rammstein are okay for me, but I'm not really a heavy metal fan. So I just thought I'd lighten the moment with that.
No, those bands are actually cool. I like Rammstein, but I'm not really like you. I'm not really a heavy metals fan.
Yeah.
I'm what did one of them call my music that I put on my channel once? GIMP music, but it's more of these electro synth stuff. So yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. There you
But
go.
yeah, it's very interesting how they play this long game, and like I don't know why people can just sit back and see, this is the results of it, and we're not doing anything, challenging government on it. The other thing as well is, and this is something that the I'm going to call it as well, that the Nazis did. Instead of doing exactly what the Marxist or Stalinist Marxist or Leninist Marxist did, by taking actual control over factories and stuff, such, they took control of the economy through a centralized reserve bank, right? So there were private banks and there were private properties within the economy of the Nazi Germany. But if you control the money flow in that country, you effectively control the economy. Therefore, you have control or ownership of the means and distribution of production, because you own that thing which dictates, what can be exchanged for what certain value. And a lot of people don't seem to think of it like that, right? So I get now and again, I'll get socialists that will tell me that no, the Nazis weren't socialists. But when you look at
No, they were.
their
It's the
practices,
National Socialist Party.
yes, it's not only in the name. It's like what Hitler declared in all of his speeches, all
Sure.
of his writings, everything, and all of their practices also run around or are built around this idea of socialism. And instead of what he would call a global socialism, because he saw both Marxist movements as a global movement of the Jews and capitalism as a global movement of the Jews, he saw a national socialism as the correct movement. And that is, by the way, where the Third Way or the Third Reich comes from, as I understand it. Yeah,
Well,
not to be
here's
confused with the Mussolini stuff, but still.
Well, speaking of Mussolini, so here's the thing. So I did compliment Wikipedia earlier about the fact that it got the description of capitalism correct, but it is wrong on its description of fascism. And I'm an author and an editor on Wikipedia, so I've corrected this, and it keeps getting changed back. So let me read Wikipedia. Fascism is a form of far-right authoritarian ultranationalism. Bullshit. No, it's not. Fascism is not far-right. Far-left fascism takes place too, and we've seen it. It's all over the world. So we're seeing fascism going on now. We're seeing the anti-fascist movement, which is a bunch of leftists who are simply brown shirt, Sturmabteilung, SA thugs beating and murdering people and silencing free speech and taking liberties away. And that's fascism. That's fascism. It's not far right. It's nonsense. That's bullshit. But that's what the Wikipedia. And so when kids go to that as a source, which I don't recommend because I've taught undergraduate and graduate students, that should be one of your last sources. I'm not denigrating Wikipedia. It's a very useful resource, but it shouldn't be your first stop, and it shouldn't be a trusted source when it's just obviously so blatantly political for things like this.
So for example, the dictionaries that I normally use is, first and foremost, I'll use the Advanced English Dictionary. Because that's the one that I downloaded on my PC. It's fairly very, very neutral in all of its descriptions. Then it's probably the Oxford Online Dictionary, not Oxford Languages. I stay away from that one. And also Merriam-Webster's. I also like Merriam-Webster's. They're also very, very straightforward with their definitions. And so the definition of fascism I have here is, it is a political theory advocating an authoritarian hierarchical government as opposed to a democracy or liberal government.
There you go.
That's it. There's no right wing, left wing.
No, exactly.
This is what it is.
That's what fascism is. It's authoritarian. It's totalitarian. And that's what fascism is. It's not right. And that's, but back to the Nazis, it's the National Socialist German Workers' Party.
Yeah.
That's a very socialist name, not just the word socialist there. Workers' Party, come on.
And there were arguments that I've heard, like, oh, but if it's ethnic based or if it's race based, then it's fascism. But then again, what about, communist Russia, like the USSR? like really you're going to call ethnic or racial tendencies or genocide movements as fascist? We just had you just mentioned the Ukrainians for the kulaks, for example. That was a genocidal movement. No doubt about that. So then that is fascist, right? China, communist China, same issue.
Uyghurs.
Everywhere, yeah. So no matter where it was implemented in during that time, it's a fascist movement. So I always tell people, like, I don't see a difference between socialism, fascism, and whatever else they want to throw at me, because they're all cut from the same tree.
Yeah, they all
They
just
all
want
have
they want to
the same.
oppress you and turn us into serfs, and so they can live in their world of privilege and pilfer from our resources by taxing us and stealing from us and dictate to us what we can do. It sounds an awful lot like the National Coronavirus Command Council.
Shh, no, shh, it's a secret. It's a secret.
Can't let that out. Anyway.
No.
All right, listen, hey, Dodgy Idealist, it's been a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to cut short here because I got to get some exercise in before the next one, and I'm gonna try to live stream from my mobile and see how that goes. So, listen, fantastic. We'll get you back on the show. I think you'll be a good guest to come back on. Okay, we'll do that again, folks. Listen, before he goes off the screen, check out his channel. I did not realize he had so few subscribers because I was like half asleep when I subscribed to it. I wasn't paying attention to the number, and I went and checked as we went streaming. And go over and check it out. So the descriptions are actually below the video. They're there this time. You'll find his blog on there if you want to read, and if you want to watch his videos. He's got awesome pastel colors on there, so I like that. But
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So you can check it out. Interesting viewpoints, and so go check him out. Subscribe to the channel. It's and we'll have him back on the channel here, but probably not for a few weeks at the earliest because I'll be in Wyoming next week. But hey, Dodgy, any final thoughts? Something you want to wrap up with? Excuse me.
No, I think we covered most of the things that I think interest both you and I. But thank you again for having me on your show. It was a pleasure being here, and it was like one of the things that I can now tick off my bucket list, having being on a live stream with Chris White. So thank you very much for that.
Wow. So this was a bucket list thing. I had no idea.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. I thought I was losing steam in South Africa. I mean, there was a time about 2 months ago, everybody's like, we got to have the Colonel on our channel. Hey, and everybody's calling me up. Even Scott Balson in Australia is like, hey, I want you on my channel. And now it's like crickets. No, I'm just kidding. But speaking of which, people coming on the show, Gareth Cliff has agreed to come on the show. We'll do that in a few weeks down the road. That'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to that. And looking for some other guests in there. But it's great having you on. I really appreciate it. It was kind of fun. Sorry about the emails back and forth, trying to sort it out. But you can imagine what it's like trying to get all this stuff done. But anyway, so good luck on your channel. I hope it grows. I hope some of the folks who are here go over and check it out. Subscribe. By the way, listen. The Dodgy Idealist has a special today on subscriptions. Costs nothing. No rand. You can sign up for no rand. Now, I would say your subscription lasts forever, but I know YouTube and I know how it works. You'll be unsubscribed at some point without your knowledge. So periodically go back and resubscribe to his channel. By the way, do the same on my channel if you've been unsubscribed. But anyway, I'm going to put you in the waiting room and I'm going to close out. If you can hang around for a couple minutes and we can close up a few things, admin things afterwards, okay?
Okay.
All right, folks, that's the Dodgy Idealist. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. Now we're going to get my face split in two different spaces, so hang on there. Okay, there. Ooh, that's confusing. Everybody getting a headache from that? Let me turn that one off. Let me turn that one off, and then we'll go back to the full screen one here. There we go. All right, folks, thanks a lot for tuning in to the stream today. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that with the Dodgy Idealist. As I mentioned, he's the love child of Wink Martindale. No, actually not true. Rumor has it he's the grandson love child of Nelson Mandela and Gracia Machel. So, I think that somewhere he lost a bit of his tan. His pigmentation got light. I think he's been spending too much time indoors. He does that. But anyway, that's the love child of, grandchild of Nelson Mandela and Gracia Machel. So just in case you guys didn't know that, we were trying to keep his identity secret, not letting people know about it. We were distorting them, thinking he was the son of Wink Martindale, the famous game show host. But anyway, folks, thanks a lot for tuning in. As I said, I'm going to be out on the road here shortly, and I'll do a couple test live streams, testing out my Streamlabs on my mobile and also my YouTube studio on my mobile just to go live. I'll talk for a little bit, say hi to folks. Feel free to tune into that and comment if you'd like. I appreciate it. And I guess I'll try to do a Night Owls edition later tonight just to talk about tomorrow's rally, because I'm going to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning to live stream that again tomorrow. I'll be having interviews with our intrepid field reporter, Erica, who will be out there, and then also with Dennis Ross from Boer Media. And tomorrow, remember, in South Africa from 10 to noon is a rally against farm murders and racism in South Africa. This is not bikers, but motor vehicles. So it should be interesting tomorrow, folks. Cool. All right. Oh, Erica says, yeah, right. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the stream. Thank you guys so much. Got to find my closing video here. Always having trouble finding that. Okay, there we go. All right, folks. Thank you so much. Actually, I got to do this backwards. Thanks a lot for tuning. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you later on. God bless, and tune in later.